Live from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, I'm Shonali Basak.
And I'm Tim Stanovac. Welcome to Bloomberg Crypto. It's a look at the people, transactions, and technology shaping the world of decentralized finance.
And coming up, Bitcoin is holding above the $60,000 level after the Fed signals the beginning of rate cuts. But Ether is lagging despite those new ETFs.
Plus, a token from a blockchain project linked to Telegram sheds more than $2 billion in value after the Telegram CEO is detained.
And a new report shows that more than half of corporate donations this U.S. election cycle have come from crypto companies.
All that ahead over the next half hour on Bloomberg Crypto. First, though, a check of the market. The Bitcoin higher by about 4% just over the last week. It did surge on Friday, along with pretty much all risk assets, though it did outperform the other risk assets. Higher by 5% on Friday alone. That, of course, was the day that Fed Chair Jay Powell delivered his Jackson Hole address, and he gave the clearest signal yet that the Fed will begin cutting interest rates next month. It did spur a $252 million net inflow into those 12 U.S. spot Bitcoin ETFs. That was the biggest daily surge in more than a month, according to data compiled by Bloomberg. Bit of a different story for Ether over the last week. It did also surge on Friday by about 5%, but it's since given up those gains and more, down about half a percentage point over the last week or so. We're going to talk a lot more about this a little later in the show, but Ether continues to lag behind Bitcoin as those recently debuted ETFs are not garnering the same excitement as those Bitcoin ETFs, Shonali.
There's another story here in the crypto world that I'm watching, Tim, and that is Toncoin, a token that is linked to the messaging app Telegram and the 10th largest crypto asset. It lost more than $2.7 billion in value by Monday morning after Telegram CEO was detained in France over alleged child protection failures in the app. They are fighting that claim, Tim, but there's much more to discuss here.
Well, let's do that with Bloomberg's Emily Nicole. She joins us from London. Emily, good to have you on the program this afternoon. Toncoin, the token of the Open Network. What is the relationship between the Open Network and Telegram?
Well, it's as you described, Tim. It's linked to Telegram, but it's not necessarily that the two are intertwined. You know, one company runs the other. But Ton is the native cryptocurrency of the Telegram app. So users wanting to send payments over the network, they can do so in Ton or in other cryptocurrencies. And there's a whole wealth of other apps that are now building on top of that network using Ton. Things like video games being played inside the app. Those have gotten more and more popular this year. And so any kind of hit to Ton is definitely a hit to the industry as well.
To that end, who is ultimately impacted by this price decline? As I understand, there have been some very large investors in it.
Yeah, so the investors in Ton, I mean, it's not all public, you know, it's token investing, so people can buy it on the open market. But from what we know in terms of those who have declared investments in public funding rounds, you've got the likes of Pantera Capital and Animoca Brands, two really big crypto VCs. You've got market makers like GSR and Wintermute and Cumberland, and you've even got exchanges like Bybit and OKX. They all have some level of investment in Toncoin. And so that's a lot of people who, you know, are a bit suffering slightly from the 20% hit that we've seen to the token in the last 7 days.
Emily, a 20% decline is huge when it comes to pretty much any asset. What is the concern with Durov's arrest and the relationship between Ton and Telegram?
Yeah, I mean, at the minute, it's not like how it was when we've seen other tokens get into trouble in the last few years regulatory-wise. We saw a bunch of cryptocurrencies get named as unregistered securities by the SEC last year. That caused those tokens to go down, and there are a lot of VC investors in those as well. And this is kind of another hit to that model. A lot of VCs now accept tokens instead of accepting traditional equity. And so that is the reason why there's a bit of concern around this. In terms of, you know, Telegram's future and how that impacts on Ton, well, if Telegram itself is having issues and Ton is what mainly trades on that app, well, that's how the two are linked. But, you know, if one could exist without the other, I mean, Telegram could probably keep going. Whether Ton would really have a home without it is another thing.
Emily, we thank you so much for your time and all your reporting. Of course, that is Emily Nicole of Bloomberg Crypto. We're going to now bring in August co-CEO Aya Kantorovich. And before we broaden out the conversation here on Bitcoin and the broader crypto markets, would love your take here on Toncoin and any ripple effects it might have, particularly for those VCs that have invested in it.
Look, I think at a high level, it's no secret that majority of the crypto ecosystem today uses Telegram as its primary messaging application. That said, despite all of that, we run and support an institutional business. None of our clients today have exposure to Ton. And I think for the other investors, it's really something that they need to hedge against. It's something that they probably spoke with the co-founder about. And I think it goes similarly hand in hand with what happened with Tornado Cash. It's still not yet clear if the founder actually knew of all of the things that he's being accused of by the French regulators today happening on the messaging app, or if they're just accusing him of building and facilitating, these conversations that were happening on the platform.
How do you think about this in the context of what's happening in the broader crypto ecosystem? You look at Toncoin, right? Tokens here that might carry a degree of risk, whereas Bitcoin, Ether have now been fully institutionalized. You have Bitcoin here really drawing significant institutional interest through those ETFs and some retail interest through those ETFs as well. In recent days, after the Fed signaled that it would be ready to cut interest rates, how much more is there in dry powder to add to that wager?
I think quite a bit. And I think the real narrative that hasn't really been spoken about with regards to Bitcoin is just thinking about how much has been absorbed in terms of some of the outflows that have happened in the last couple of weeks and months. If you think about, whether it was the German government, the Silk Road, Mt. Gox, the unwinding of the Japanese carry trade, really billions of dollars of Bitcoin flow was absorbed. And what you saw was that Bitcoin is still up 38% year to date. And so I think it's really bullish for the space. It really goes to show, as you mentioned, that there is that dry powder. They're sitting on the sidelines that's ready to look at Bitcoin as a store of value, an inflationary hedge, and that there are opportunities to trade. You just saw this morning the NASDAQ is seeking an SEC approval to trade Bitcoin options. And so you're seeing more of that institutional interest again and demand in order to bring your traditional structures into the Bitcoin ecosystem, because there are opportunities to make that money.
I have to admit, I'm a little obsessed with this Toncoin story, Aya, and I'm curious if you think a 20% decline is overdone, if you see this as a buying opportunity.
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I think until you have information on whether or not the founder actually knew that these specific deals, conversations were happening on the platform and he facilitated them, then I would say, it's probably too early to tell. And it's similar with what happened with Tornado Cash. And I would really sit and wait to see, as the French regulators have to put together their case as to what was the CEO's intention, what was his activity, what actions was he doing that made him liable for all the, I think it was 10 specific cases that are now against him.
As someone who's been in this market a long time, of course, there is an inclination to spend more of our time talking about the investments themselves rather than the way the industry communicates. But the point you were making here, Telegram has been a huge way for the industry to communicate. A lot of people in just traditional way of finance use it as well. Can you kind of draw a little infrastructure here for me on what people use, why people use it? Discord was popular for a while. People are communicating on new channels that are being built, social media platforms on Base. How big is Telegram? Why is it so important?
It is huge for the ecosystem. Telegram is really one of the core pillars for the way that, both institutions and anyone in the ecosystem communicates today. And the reason for that being, again, it's both as it pertains to the encryption of the underlying conversations that are happening, but also specifically at this point, there's a pretty large network that's already existent for crypto on Telegram. And so you don't have to recreate or build or move those conversations to other platforms. So, Telegram is a very core pillar to the crypto ecosystem. That said, realistically, there just needs to be changes around the way information may or may not be shared with regulators, with investigators, as it pertains to some of these very serious allegations that French regulators are making against Telegram today.
Is there a concern for you that Telegram in some sense will go away, or it will not be the platform that it has been for years if French regulators do move forward with a case?
No, I think that these are all decisions that, there are very clear actions that Telegram can take in order to continue to remain active in the market. Obviously, institutional investors will not want to use it. If, for example, Telegram makes the decision not to go ahead and, move forward with the actions the French regulators want them to. But I really don't see that getting to that case, just given how important it is to the ecosystem today. Really, this is about sharing information. And it has been shared in previous cases, for example, the FTX case, in which they did get access to a number of Telegram conversations. So this has been done before in the past. It's going to be really interesting to see, again, what role the CEO played. But it's not to say, and I don't think that this is, the end-all, be-all of Telegram in the crypto ecosystem. And it's still going to remain a very strong pillar of the way we communicate today.
Well, let's go from European regulators to U.S. regulators and talk the election, because we're certainly in the home stretch when it comes to campaigns, as we do get into September, Aya. Curious from your view what it looks like come November in terms of a Harris administration or a Trump administration. Which one is better, in your view, for the crypto industry?
I think today what we're seeing in the ecosystem is that you have a lot of single issue voters. And, that's something where at least the Trump party has at least, given a little bit of guidelines as it pertains to what to expect from crypto regulation if, he gets elected in the next 4 years. Whereas on the Kamala side, the issue has been, there's been one comment from a senior advisor as it pertains to, making crypto regulation a lot easier and clearer, but it really has not been clear guidelines. And so for a lot of these, whether it's startups, founders, clients, they're really thinking with their pockets right now as it pertains to, can I continue to build my business in the United States? And I think what's been consistently disappointing is that in Europe you have MiCA. It is very clear regulation and tells you exactly what you need to do in order to operate in those countries. In the United States, we are far behind with not having that sort of guideline. And so really looking for that in regardless of which party steps up in the next couple months. All
right, we're gonna have to leave it there. Aya Kantorovich, August co-CEO, really appreciate you taking the time. Always good to have you on the program. Well, coming up, John Wu joins us on the other side to discuss why Ether ETFs are seeing a streak of net outflows. And access all the latest data and news on crypto, check out CRYP Go on the Bloomberg terminal. This is Bloomberg. Ether ETFs have seen their longest streak of outflows since they started trading. Let's discuss with Avalab's president, John Wu. John, good to have you on the program. Why do you think we haven't seen the same enthusiasm for spot Ether ETFs that we've seen for spot Bitcoin ETFs?
It's nice to see you, Tim. I don't think anyone anticipated Ethereum ETF to be as successful as the Bitcoin ETF was. But in reality, Bitcoin really has just one competitor, that's gold. Ethereum is about creating utility and use cases. They actually have many, many competitors, from Avalanche to Solana to a whole bunch of others. And so you had a situation where the supply, because it's a mint and earn proof of stake type model, where supply is increasing, and yet transactions are just kind of steady. So there's a little bit of imbalance. But I am very positive that over time, it is still in pole position and has a chance to really create a lot of, this access will allow others to get into the space.
But what about everything that's not Bitcoin? At the end of the day, you see the flows, especially in recent days, that have come into those Bitcoin ETFs, that divergence you saw in that chart a little earlier, growing a little bit between Ethereum and Bitcoin, and more hopes of a Solana ETF being approved, really diminishing here in many ways. There's not a lot of hope for one to be approved in the near term here. So what does that mean? Would you want to be associated with some sort of ETF wrapper at some point? Is it problematic that more tokens are not?
So I can't speak for who's going to get ETF or not. But as an operator space, what I care about is that you see more adoption. And this space really has three components that drive it. One is the macro level. We saw Jerome Powell come out, so that's going to be positive. Not just US. Every central bank is lowering rates. Flows, the fact that there is an ETF for Ethereum and Bitcoin will create more access, so that's ultimately positive. Morgan Stanley is going to let their RIAs now sell Bitcoin ETF, so that's definitely positive. And I think what people don't realize is the adoption on network and in this space is actually growing a lot. If you look at wallets, look at addresses, it's there. So I'm very positive going forward.
Do you think there's some sort of knowledge gap between what people know about Bitcoin and what people think they know about Ether/Ethereum? Like they don't really understand, at least how you describe it. Yes, Bitcoin's digital gold, but what exactly is the use case for Ethereum?
Yeah, exactly. So for Bitcoin, I think people own it for different reasons, but a lot of people think it's a store of value. So again, competition is gold, maybe stablecoins.
Do you think it's a store of value?
Definitely if you're in emerging markets. If you're in Argentina or Turkey, when you're trying to figure out ways to hedge inflation or devaluation of currency, absolutely. In fact, that's part of the growth in stablecoins. Those are the two choices. Bitcoin, if you don't want the volatile Bitcoin, you find a stablecoin. So in terms of in the US, I think ultimately what you have to have is more use cases. And that is actually growing, even with stablecoins. I mean, PayPal stablecoin is now $1 billion. You have on-chain people who use stablecoins.
But let's differentiate this significantly here, because Bitcoin, there was a point in time. You could go to El Salvador and pay for some coffee at a Starbucks, right? With Bitcoin, there was a mechanism in which to do that. There was this narrative around payments adoption. But at this point, if the use case for payments is tilted towards stablecoins, why not just buy stablecoins?
Stablecoins have grown from about market cap of about 120, 130 billion at the beginning of the year to 180-ish. So that's like a 40%. So there's an underlying story, exactly right, Shanali, that stablecoins actually has grown in market cap almost as much as Bitcoin this year. So they're both being established as a store of value. But I think both of them can be used as payment rails as well. I mean, you had, I think, Jeremy Allaire on a few weeks ago. I just met with Jeremy. He's ecstatic about the issuance, and part of that is exactly what we're talking about. I think in the U.S., we think of everything in one perspective, but overseas, 30% of people in Argentina and Turkey have actually used Bitcoin as a payment mechanism or crypto as a payment mechanism on a daily basis.
Hey, John, I keep hearing from folks on our program that there are a lot of single issue voters out there who are focusing on crypto front and center, and that is the important issue to them come this election. Do you believe that? Do you have any evidence for that?
So obviously, I am on your show a lot, and I'm also a big fan of your show, so I've listened to the last couple episodes. I think you've asked every single guest this question, and not one has given you a straight answer. So I don't know why you think I will, but
well, let's start with the idea
of being. Because we will push you a little harder.
Yes, that's
Well, let's start
sure.
with the idea of there actually being single-issue voters before we get to whichever candidate you think will do a better job for the crypto industry, because there are a lot of issues out there that voters are voting on. Is crypto actually one of those issues that will push somebody and a large number of people, especially in swing states, one way versus another way?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Coinbase has released numbers, 53 million crypto holders in the US. And at the core, what is crypto? Crypto is about giving people choice and their own governance and self-sovereignty. So I don't think any American would not want to not be heard, and they all want choice. I mean, it's fundamental. So I do think a lot of people think of this as a very important issue going forward.
Just really quickly here, Trump or Harris here? Trump has been very vocal about it, but Harris has not been quite clear yet about what her stance is. Not her as part of the Biden administration, but what her stance is on crypto. How does that change the calculus between who you choose?
We're all waiting to hear. The good news is, Schumer has come out and said that there is, more thought to this. I think we also need to thank Trump for recognizing that there's a lot of money being raised, and there's also a possibility of mobilizing this large base of users in crypto. And the one thing I can promise and guarantee is that after this hump in 2024, 2025 will be better with more certainty. You're going to see more growth in the space.
John, we thank you so very much. That is Ava Labs President John Wu on everything crypto, including how crypto executives may vote in November. Now coming up, 2 crypto firms account for nearly half of the total corporate donations in this U.S. election cycle. We're going to bring you details of what is going on next. This is Bloomberg. The crypto industry, of course, they have a lot on the line. They're now spending more on U.S. elections than any other industry, and that's according to a report by Public Citizen. Firms have donated some $119 million this election cycle, largely from Coinbase and from Ripple. Bloomberg's Mike Regan joins us now to explain exactly what's going on. Coinbase in particular, pretty interesting here, with Fairshake and Brian Armstrong himself really stepping up and holding large events to bring people to the table. It's not just about the presidential elections, is it?
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, Shanali. I mean, 119 million, to put that into perspective, that is about, according to this Public Citizen report, about half of all corporate giving to politicians and PACs this year. It's mind-boggling when you think, well, the total market cap of crypto is about 2.2 trillion. So it's not even as big as one Apple or one Microsoft or one NVIDIA, and yet they're accounting for about half of all donations.
Mike, what do they want?
I think, it's safe to say they want a friendlier,
they want to exist.
More hands-off, yeah.
But is it actually existential? That's the question.
I think, if you look at some of the biggest givers, obviously Coinbase, Ripple, I mean, these are companies that have been fighting SEC cases all year, and so if not existential, very much considered a big threat to them. They really are digging deep to try to get. And to your point, Shanali, not necessarily the president they want, but they're really laser focused on these down ballot House races, especially. And the Public Citizen did crunch some numbers and found that of 42 primary races where they actually donated to both sides, mind you. They're just picking out candidates, Republicans and Democrats. But of those 42 races that they spent on, they got their favored result in 36 of them. So it shows you that, a little bit of money sprinkled on these, especially in the primary phase, can really have an impact, or apparently have an impact, at least, according to the results we saw this primary season.
I wonder if corporations are really picking up where individuals have left off. You think about the last presidential election and how big the FTX executives were into giving to presidential races and congressional races. Have these corporations now taken the role?
I think so, especially when you think, in the days of FTX, there wasn't this sort of regulatory threat that we've seen so far with all these SEC cases. So I think that's a pretty good bet to say that. And the other thing is that Public Citizen looked at is since Citizens United, the Supreme Court decision in 2010 that allowed corporations to basically give whatever they want, crypto is now the second biggest industry to donate behind fossil fuels. It's mind-boggling.
Incredible to see the money behind it. Yeah, Bloomberg's Mike Regan. Mike, thanks as always. Good to see you. That is going to do it for Bloomberg Crypto. Join us again next week right here on Bloomberg TV. This is Bloomberg.